A new group has come forward claiming to know who killed Jimmy Hoffa and where the one-time Teamsters boss is buried.
After decades of fruitless searches and endless dead ends, one of America's most haunting mysteries has finally been resolved. Jimmy Hoffa, the powerful Teamsters leader whose disappearance in 1975 has puzzled law enforcement and captured the imagination of the public for generations, has been found. The story of his vanishing was never just a crime. It became a legend whispered in back rooms, mob hangouts, and government offices alike. The question, "Where is Hoffa?" has echoed for decades, leaving families, friends, and investigators haunted by the uncertainty of his fate. Yet, it wasn't just the mystery itself that gripped the world. It was the secrets that lay behind it, and the people who refused to let this story die. Ordinary citizens, private investigators, and retired detectives, working quietly away from media attention, would eventually uncover what decades of federal investigations could not. Their work sent shockwaves through the crime world and finally provided answers to questions that had lingered for half a century. Today, we take you on a journey through the decades-long hunt for Jimmy Hoffa, revealing the twists and turns, the cryptic clues, and the chilling discoveries that led to the shocking revelation of his resting place. This is not just a story about a missing person. It is a tale of power, betrayal, organized crime, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Prepare yourself for a story that is as mesmerizing as it is haunting, as thrilling as it is unsettling. The truth about Jimmy Hoffa has finally emerged, and the path to uncovering it is more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. For decades, Hoffa's disappearance had faded into the background of history, relegated to cold case files, crime documentaries, and occasional media retrospectives. The world moved on, but the memory of Jimmy Hoffa lingered. That changed dramatically in 2019 when Martin Scorsese released The Irishman. The film, based on Frank Sheeran's controversial confessions, offered a chilling reconstruction of Hoffa's final hours. According to Sheeran, Hoffa had been lured to a Detroit house, murdered in cold blood, and his body swiftly cremated, leaving little trace behind. The dramatization captivated audiences worldwide, reigniting fascination with a case that had long seemed unsolvable. However, skepticism arose almost immediately. Sheeran's account had long been questioned, and investigators quickly pointed out inconsistencies. The house Sheeran identified as the scene of the murder had been examined thoroughly by forensic teams. Luminol tests revealed traces of blood, but none could be conclusively linked to Hoffa. No weapon, no DNA, no proof, just shadows and speculation, yet the impact of The Irishman was undeniable. What decades of newspaper articles, police reports, and public debates had failed to achieve, a Hollywood film accomplished effortlessly. It brought Hoffa back into the spotlight. Suddenly, a new generation of viewers debated theories, shared ideas, and questioned what really happened on that fateful day in 1975. Social media buzzed with speculation. Podcasts dissected Sheeran's claims, and amateur detectives began scanning every available clue with renewed enthusiasm. In the midst of this renewed attention, a private investigative group called the Casebreakers began to dig where others had long given up. Comprised of retired detectives, intelligence officers, and forensic experts, the team specialized in cold cases that had confounded law enforcement for years. Their breakthrough came from a most unlikely source, the deathbed belongings of a Wisconsin police officer. Among his possessions was a single playing card, an ace of spades, with a cryptic message scrawled in black ink. Milwaukee. Third base, Old Stadium, 1995. At first, the note seemed meaningless, another dead end in the labyrinth of Hoffa theories. But the Casebreakers saw potential in the seemingly random clue. Third base, they realized, referred to Milwaukee County Stadium, home of the Brewers until its demolition in 2001. Using archival satellite imagery from the late 1990s, investigators studied the stadium grounds and noticed something peculiar, a patch of disturbed clay near the third base line. The soil appeared tampered with, as though it had been dug up and hastily covered over. This discovery, while subtle, was enough to reignite the investigation. Could this patch of clay conceal decades-old secrets? The Casebreakers refused to let the lead fade. Every detail was scrutinized, every historical record examined. They were determined to uncover whether this seemingly ordinary baseball field held the answers to one of America's greatest mysteries. The patch of disturbed earth near the former third base became the focal point of an investigation that would test every forensic tool available. Soil analysts, geologists, and ground-penetrating radar specialists were brought in to examine the site. Their scans revealed subtle layers beneath the surface that didn't belong, layers suggesting that something or someone had been buried there. Could this possibly be Hoffa's final resting place, hidden beneath a place where thousands once cheered baseball games, completely oblivious to the secrets beneath their feet? The site had since been transformed. After the old stadium was demolished in 2001, the area was repurposed into part of American Family Field, including youth baseball fields. Children played on the very spot that once witnessed professional sports glory, their laughter echoing over ground that now seemed ominously significant. For investigators, the ordinary appearance of the field was deceptive. Beneath the surface lay clues that had been hidden for decades. Using the latest forensic tools, the team conducted a meticulous sweep. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the field layer by layer, searching for anomalies. Initially, nothing seemed unusual. The soil appeared uniform and undisturbed, but patience paid off. Small irregularities began to appear, subtle shifts in soil density, compacted layers, and patterns inconsistent with natural formations. Each discovery raised more questions. Had they truly stumbled upon Hoffa's burial site? Could this be the moment that resolved the mystery that had haunted America for 50 years? The case-breakers worked quietly, deliberately, understanding the significance of every finding. What began as a cryptic message on a playing card had now led them to a precise location with compelling forensic evidence. The next step would demand careful coordination, expert consultation, and, above all, patience. One misstep could compromise the breakthrough that decades of investigation had failed to achieve. The radar scans, though initially inconclusive, eventually revealed a dense layer of clay, sharply outlined and unnaturally compacted. Forensic experts immediately recognized the significance. Compacted clay slows decomposition and is sometimes used to conceal remains intentionally. This anomaly alone suggested deliberate concealment, but it was not definitive proof. Enter Moxie, an elite cadaver dog with more than 200 successful recoveries. Her handler, a retired police officer with decades of field experience, had rarely seen a case as promising and as chilling as this one. The dog's reaction was instant. Nose to the ground, Moxie moved with purpose toward the precise location identified by radar, circling and pausing, signaling unequivocally that she had detected human remains. With radar and Moxie pointing to the same patch of earth, the case-breakers had the confidence to proceed. Legal permissions were secured and a formal excavation began. Cameras documented the process as forensic specialists meticulously sifted every shovel of soil. 2 feet down, the hard-packed clay gave way, revealing organic material. Silence gripped the team. Could it really be him? Initial on-site examination confirmed human remains, adult male. Samples were rushed to a laboratory, and days later, DNA results arrived. The markers matched Jimmy Hoffa's family. After 50 years of speculation, false leads, and public obsession, the body of Jimmy Hoffa had been found. But the revelation did not end there. Forensic dating revealed a shocking twist. Hoffa's body had not been buried in 1975 when he disappeared, but around 1995. This implied that someone had moved his body 2 decades after his disappearance. Furthermore, before his disappearance, Jimmy Hoffa was a towering figure in American labor history. Rising from humble beginnings, he organized dock workers and quickly ascended the ranks of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. By 1958, Hoffa became president, overseeing a union that controlled roughly 90% of U.S. transportation. Under his leadership, wages and benefits improved dramatically, earning him admiration from workers and fear from opponents. But Hoffa's power came with dangerous alliances. In 1941, conflicts with rival groups in Detroit led him to enlist the mafia to eliminate competition. While effective, the decision tied Hoffa irrevocably to organized crime. The Teamsters Pension Fund became a financial tool for mafia projects, including Las Vegas casinos, creating a mutually beneficial but morally compromised relationship. Legal troubles eventually caught up with Hoffa. Convicted of bribery, jury tampering, and mail fraud, he began a 13-year sentence in 1967. President Nixon's pardon in 1971 came with restrictions. Hoffa was banned from union activity until 1980. Despite the pardon, trouble followed. By July 1975, investigators discovered massive looting of the Teamsters Pension Fund, and just weeks later, Hoffa vanished, sparking one of the most infamous missing person cases in history. The discovery of Jimmy Hoffa's body marked a historic breakthrough, but it was far from the end. Questions remain about who moved him, why the concealment occurred decades later, and what secrets still lie buried alongside him. The uncovering of additional remains at the site hints at a larger, darker story, a story of organized crime, deception, and calculated concealment even after 50 years. Hoffa's tale reminds us of the shadowy intersections between power, corruption, and mystery. The truth may have finally emerged from beneath the earth, but the full story, the forces behind the cover-up, and the others involved, remains hidden. The hunt for answers continues, and the echoes of this chilling saga will reverberate for generations. With Hoffa's body finally uncovered, the focus shifted from discovery to understanding. The casebreaker's initial breakthrough had cracked open decades of silence, but federal authorities quickly recognized that uncovering the body was only the first step in unraveling the full story. The FBI, long silent on the case, now joined forces with a private team, combing through old files, witness statements, and overlooked tips. The archives of decades revealed a complex web of leads, some conflicting, others pointing toward shadowy figures long thought untouchable. Investigators painstakingly retraced Hoffa's final days. Every meeting, phone call, and trip was scrutinized. Who had been in contact with him in the weeks leading to his disappearance? Which associates vanished, changed addresses, or altered their routines around the same time? Slowly, a pattern emerged. Connections that suggested Hoffa's disappearance was not a single act of violence, but a coordinated plan involving multiple actors with motive and access. Declassified records and informant testimonies added further complexity. Several mob members had provided conflicting accounts over the years, some claiming ignorance, others hinting at deeper conspiracies. The investigators began to map these connections, creating a timeline that highlighted not only Hoffa's movements, but also those of key players who may have orchestrated his abduction and subsequent relocation of the body. Meanwhile, the casebreakers continued digging into the land records, construction changes, and city planning documents of the Milwaukee Stadium site. Every renovation, every soil layer, and every underground utility line was cross-referenced against the potential timeline of burial and relocation. The amount of meticulous detail was staggering, but investigators knew the truth had been hidden in plain sight, and it was their job to uncover it. For the public, the revelation of Hoffa's remains brought closure, but for the investigators, it only opened the door to the larger mystery. Who moved him in 1995, and why choose a baseball field? Why conceal him beneath a place built for children to play? Every answer uncovered led to more questions, deepening the suspense and tension surrounding the case. It was no longer just a cold case. It was a labyrinth of deceit, organized crime influence, and carefully concealed truths. The deeper the investigation went, the more entangled Hoffa's disappearance became with organized crime. The mafia's fingerprints were everywhere. During Hoffa's tenure as Teamsters president, his union had controlled massive financial resources, particularly pension funds, which became a lifeline for mob investments, especially in Las Vegas casinos. Loans worth millions flowed through Hoffa's union, and in return, the mafia offered protection, influence, and a tacit alliance that proved mutually beneficial, but also deadly. Decision to move Hoffa's body decades after his disappearance suggested that someone with long-term foresight and resources orchestrated the burial. The level of precision required to relocate a corpse without detection bury it beneath a public stadium, and manipulate the soil indicated deep knowledge of law enforcement practices and forensic science. Investigators focused on mob figures who had both motive and opportunity. Key suspects were those who had risen in influence during the 1980s and 1990s, long after Hoffa's initial disappearance. They had reasons to ensure that Hoffa's body remained hidden, perhaps to erase incriminating links or to protect ongoing operations. The fact that partial remains of a second individual were found suggested that Hoffa's disappearance might have been part of a larger pattern of silencing threats, or eliminating witnesses who could tie the mob to illicit activities. Every recovered document, every intercepted communication, and every testimonial was pieced together like a puzzle. The connections illuminated the lengths to which organized crime had infiltrated institutions, manipulated narratives, and concealed its actions from the public eye. Hoffa's story, once a singular disappearance, now represented decades of corruption and a meticulously executed cover-up. The mob's role in the case also revealed the limitations of traditional law enforcement at the time. Without modern forensic technology and the persistence of private investigators like the case breakers, Hoffa's body might still have remained hidden, and the truth might have died with him. The Hoffa case also highlighted how modern science can rewrite history. Ground-penetrating radar, once a novelty, became a crucial tool in identifying anomalies that human eyes could never detect. Soil density, compaction layers, and minor disturbances, invisible to construction crews and city planners, were revealed in stunning detail. DNA analysis played an equally transformative role. When Hoffa's remains were recovered, decades of exposure and soil conditions had not destroyed the genetic material needed for conclusive identification. The combination of cadaver dog detection, forensic soil analysis, and advanced DNA sequencing provided investigators with irrefutable evidence. Satellite imagery, historical maps, and construction documents became instrumental in tracing the movements and alterations of the stadium grounds over the decades. Even though the original Milwaukee County Stadium had been demolished, archived satellite photos revealed disturbances in the soil dating back to the 1990s, providing the missing link between the cryptic playing card clue and the actual burial site. Technology had turned what seemed like a hopeless case into a solvable mystery. Tools that law enforcement could not access in the 1970s now gave the case-breakers the edge, combining historical data with modern scientific methods to unearth secrets hidden for generations. As the excavation continued, a shocking discovery complicated the narrative. Beneath the same patch of earth, a second set of partial human remains emerged. Smaller in stature, these remains hinted at a different individual, possibly another victim of the same criminal enterprise that had ensnared Hoffa. Forensic experts worked tirelessly to determine the identity, age, and time of death. While the analysis could not immediately provide a name, it indicated that the burial was intentional, deliberate, and connected to the broader scheme that had concealed Hoffa for decades. The presence of a second set of remains suggested that Hoffa's disappearance may have been part of a more extensive and sinister plan. The revelation sent chills through both the investigative team and federal authorities. This was no longer a single cold case. It was a multi-layered crime scene, a historical web of secrecy and criminal precision, demanding further investigation and scrutiny. Persistence, attention to detail, and the willingness to explore unconventional leads were key in uncovering Hoffa's remains. Modern technology, combined with historical records and intuition, allowed investigators to overcome decades of obfuscation and concealment. The case also exposes the long shadow of organized crime and its ability to manipulate institutions, resources, and narratives. Hoffa's story is not only about a disappearance, it is a lesson in vigilance, persistence, and the enduring pursuit of justice. Even with Hoffa's body recovered, questions remain. Who specifically orchestrated the movement of his body in 1995? Why was a public stadium chosen as a burial site? And who else may have been involved, as suggested by the secondary remains discovered at the site? The case-breakers and federal authorities continue their investigation, following leads that may uncover additional crime scenes, witnesses, or documents that shed light on the full scope of the conspiracy. Hoffa's story, while partially resolved, remains a haunting testament to the power of secrecy, deception, and calculated criminal precision. The mystery is far from over, and the hunt for answers continues, leaving the world watching as decades-old secrets are slowly brought into the light. The discovery of Hoffa's remains reignited memories that had long been buried, not just in the earth, but in the minds of those who had been close to the events. Retired Teamsters members, former FBI agents, and locals who had lived near Milwaukee's stadium recalled events that had seemed trivial at the time but now painted a chilling picture. Many witnesses spoke of strange activity around the stadium in the mid-1990s, unmarked vehicles appearing at odd hours, construction crews working in secrecy, and unexplained burials or deliveries. Some recalled men in suits watching from a distance, while others remembered seeing Hoffa's known associates meeting clandestinely in local bars or diners. Fear had kept many silent for decades. Organized crime's reputation for retaliation meant that speaking out could come with a heavy price. But with the revelation of Hoffa's remains, some were finally willing to share their stories. Carefully recorded testimonies revealed patterns, suspicious behavior by certain individuals, unexplained movements at the stadium, and even cryptic warnings about speaking publicly. Piecing together these accounts, investigators began to reconstruct a shadowy narrative of surveillance, intimidation, and long-term concealment. Witnesses described how Hoffa's disappearance had impacted the community. Rumors circulating in hushed tones, subtle signs of fear, and the silent acknowledgement that something terrible had occurred. Each account, no matter how small, became a critical piece of the puzzle, revealing a story that was far larger and more complex than any single discovery. The timeline of Hoffa's disappearance and eventual burial was nothing short of extraordinary. In 1975, Hoffa vanished without a trace. Yet forensic dating revealed that his body had been buried around 1995, 20 years later. Investigators faced the daunting task of reconstructing 2 decades of hidden activity. By cross-referencing witness accounts, old construction logs, and law enforcement records, they were able to map the movements of suspects, mafia figures, and officials over this critical period. Why had the body been moved 2 decades after his disappearance? One theory suggested that the delayed burial was part of a long-term strategy by organized crime to ensure that Hoffa's disappearance remained unsolved while removing any immediate risk to the perpetrators. Satellite imagery, old photographs, and city planning records provided additional clues. Investigators could pinpoint when the stadium grounds had been altered, the exact locations of soil disturbances, and when the youth fields were constructed. Every piece of information added another layer to the timeline, revealing a calculated effort to conceal the truth while keeping the site seemingly ordinary to the public. By the end of this painstaking process, investigators had created a detailed chronology, a map of clandestine movements, construction cover-ups, and criminal oversight that explained why Hoffa remained missing for so long. The reconstructed timeline not only confirmed the accuracy of the deathbed clue, but also provided a framework for understanding the secondary remains and the ongoing investigation into other potential victims. The investigation into Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance had already taken decades, but as federal authorities and the case-breakers dug deeper, a new frontier opened, the Teamsters' own archives. Hidden in dusty filing cabinets, locked rooms, and long-forgotten vaults lay documents that told a story no one had pieced together before. Ledgers with suspicious entries, memos from union executives, and financial correspondence all hinted at a level of corruption that went far beyond what the public had imagined. Some of the entries detailed massive withdrawals from pension funds, loans extended to Las Vegas casinos under vague terms, and payments made to shadowy consultants whose identities remained elusive. Investigators began connecting the dots. The same figures who had benefited from Hoffa's leadership also had ties to organized crime, creating a web that spanned decades. One memo, dating from 1974, referenced an unexplained security adjustment, a line item that investigators later interpreted as a clandestine fund for dealing with internal threats or perhaps silencing potential informants. Every document opened a new layer of the story. A single page could alter the timeline or reveal a previously unknown connection. Old meeting notes described transactions between the union and figures who would later rise in the mafia's hierarchy. Investigators realized that Hoffa's disappearance wasn't a standalone event. It was intertwined with decades of financial and organizational maneuvering, with consequences that rippled far beyond Detroit or Milwaukee. The archives also contained communications from within the union itself, letters and memos expressing fear or dissatisfaction with certain members' actions. Some documents hinted that Hoffa himself had grown wary of particular associates shortly before his disappearance. Could these warnings have led to his abduction or even motivated the subsequent relocation of his remains? Piecing together the union records, investigators constructed a timeline of financial, social, and criminal interactions. This timeline revealed patterns, recurring names, and suspicious coincidences that had been overlooked in earlier investigations. What initially seemed like bureaucratic minutiae now illuminated the broader story. A story of power, influence, and the lengths to which people would go to protect their interests. Technology and forensic science had advanced exponentially since Hoffa's disappearance. Once the casebreakers and federal agents secured the site, forensic teams revisited Hoffa's remains, applying cutting-edge techniques that were unavailable in 1975 or even 1995. Isotope analysis, for instance, allowed investigators to determine geographic markers and dietary patterns, helping trace Hoffa's movements in his final years. Clothing fibers and soil samples, meticulously collected during excavation, were examined under high-resolution microscopes. The analysis revealed tiny fragments of material that suggested Hoffa's body had been handled with care, wrapped or moved multiple times before final burial. Even the compacted clay was analyzed to determine composition and origin, indicating that it had likely been brought from elsewhere and deliberately placed over the grave to delay decomposition. Trace evidence, including minute particles of metal and synthetic fibers, hinted at the involvement of vehicles and tools during the relocation. Investigators speculated that the body had been moved using equipment capable of covering large distances discreetly. These findings, while subtle, reinforced the notion that the perpetrators had planned the operation with extreme precision, fully aware of forensic limitations at the time. Additionally, new DNA analysis techniques enabled specialists to examine previously inconclusive material. This included samples that had been too degraded for testing decades earlier. Forensic teams identified genetic markers confirming the identity. Importantly, these accounts highlighted the human dimension of the investigation. Fear, loyalty, and long-standing threats had shaped the silence that allowed Hoffa's mystery to persist for so long. Understanding this psychological landscape was as crucial as forensic evidence in unraveling the full story. While investigators worked in secrecy, the media played a pivotal role in sustaining public interest. The Irishman, documentaries, and true crime podcasts revived the fascination with Hoffa's disappearance, ensuring that the story remained in the collective consciousness. Media coverage created pressure, indirectly motivating authorities and private investigators to pursue new leads. The cultural revival also had broader implications. Classrooms, crime shows, and public forums analyzed Hoffa's case, dissecting potential motives, mob influence, and legal failures. This widespread attention helped preserve historical records, prompted witnesses to speak, and made it more difficult for perpetrators or accomplices to remain hidden. The mafia's precision in orchestrating Hoffa's disappearance and delayed burial became clearer with every investigation. Analysts examined their operational methods: secrecy, intimidation, misinformation, and careful timing. The decision to move Hoffa's body in 1995, 20 years after he vanished, reflected long-term planning, likely motivated by emerging threats, internal conflicts, or changing alliances. Within the criminal network, the meticulous placement beneath a public stadium, a location now repurposed for children's baseball, demonstrated the perpetrator's confidence in avoiding detection. Investigators concluded that only individuals with extensive resources, knowledge of law enforcement practices, and control over local environments could execute such a plan. The mob's long-term strategy became a case study in criminal foresight, showing how organized crime anticipated future scrutiny, leveraged institutional weaknesses, and manipulated both people and environments to conceal evidence for decades. Investigators worked to reconstruct a dual timeline: Hoffa's last known activities in 1975 and the events leading to his relocation in 1995. Witness testimonies, combined with forensic dating, suggested that Hoffa may have initially been held or buried elsewhere before being transferred to the Milwaukee site. The 20-year gap raised new questions. Why wait so long? Evidence suggested that the relocation coincided with changes in criminal leadership, evolving law enforcement pressures, and the need to secure evidence or prevent exposure. The operation required careful coordination, the use of vehicles, tools, and concealment techniques that left minimal trace.